I'm Pam. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and I'm a person living with post-traumatic stress disorder. Today, I'm going to do part 2 of my 2-part series on eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy, known better by its initials, EMDR. I started doing EMDR about 2.5 years ago. Now, I was about 6 months into my first major flare-up of post-traumatic stress disorder, and I was not in a good place. I was continuing to have my symptoms worsen, and I was really, very eager to just find something that could help more than what I was doing already. I'd heard a lot from other people who had PTSD about this technique, EMDR, and, really decided that it was time. But one of the challenges that I have is that I have repressed memories. And so I wasn't really sure if it would work. And I reached out to the therapist I ultimately ended up working with, and I asked, and she said, well, sometimes EMDR does cause recovery of repressed memories, and, we can give it a try. And so that was good enough for me. I've mentioned before that in addition to repressed memories, I also have issues with denial, and the two really work very well together. They're like a superpower that no one should want because obviously there are issues within them, but because of that combination, I kind of refused to accept what the evidence was telling me at that point in time. So we went in with an open mind, not really sure what would come up. Would anything come up? Did something else happen? There are a few things I want to say about EMDR. And if you want to know my full story, I would suggest looking at my repressed memory video, part 2, and that will give you my full story. Here I'm really going to focus on what EMDR itself did. First, I want to talk about what it felt like. For me, I found that the light bar with the hand paddles worked best for me. I described that EMDR is done in sprints. So for me, my therapist used a non-standard approach. So sometimes I did it as long as 2 minutes, maybe even 3, but never longer than that. So, that's kind of how long one actually does the EMDR process. You spend a lot of time talking about it, but you don't spend all that much time in it. So that's kind of how it works. What does it feel like? So for me, what it felt like was similar to hypnosis, but much, it's done for a shorter duration of time. And also similar but different too. For me, I felt like definitely I was in some sort of altered state, but not an intense one. So that's kind of what EMDR felt like. For me, I began to recover memories immediately. It's helped me to understand repressed memories a bit more. And so what I can say is that I know that the memories are there. Some of them are detailed and some of them are right there. There's something that blocks me from being able to access them. It's not that they don't exist. It's not that they're hard to find. It's just simply, I don't want to open them up. It is what it is. So there is that component. And so EMDR caused me to recover memories immediately. Some of the details were corroborated by a family member, so I have no question about the accuracy, at least of the very detailed memories. I'll talk a little bit now about how EMDR worked for me. So EMDR caused me to have a few things. One was intensity of emotion. So I would get the memory, and then I would get the emotional feelings. The memory felt like a normal, well, not really, but about as normal as a memory can be, kind of, I guess, when you're talking about trauma. But the emotions felt like they were happening to me at the time that I was doing the EMDR. So I had these intense emotions. I would feel intense fear. I would feel nausea so intense that I felt like I was going to throw up. And would often, you know, scope out like where the garbage cans were in the therapist's office in case, you know, I needed one. And so there was that intensity of emotion that I would feel during EMDR as I was recovering memories from being sexually abused. And then the other component was the body sensations. And sometimes the body sensations were attached to the memories. So I would feel like chills running up and down my legs. But then also there were body sensations and movements that had to do with the abuse. And those also were intense. Sometimes my body moved, I couldn't help it. They, you know, certainly tied into the emotions. And so that part was intense. But the fascinating part was for me how EMDR worked. What would happen is the therapist would have me concentrate on a piece of it. So I might concentrate on that feeling of fear. What was the feeling of fear in my body? And as I concentrated, it would slowly dissolve that feeling. And so after a couple of rounds of EMDR, I would really not feel much of that sensation at all attached to that memory. It was really quite fascinating. What I found initially is that my symptoms, it was tough. You know, I found out parts of my story that I, you know, didn't know before, and the details were horrific and painful. But the symptoms started to improve. And so by the time I finished, I was doing EMDR 3 times a week for roughly about 5 months. And I reached a point of diminishing return. And by the time I stopped, my symptoms, certain ones had almost vanished. Panic attacks greatly decreased following doing EMDR. My flashbacks, I had far fewer, and they really reduced in intensity. When I would go to bed at night, I had this like overwhelming fear, and that really mostly went away. And so my symptoms have improved, and not only have they stayed improved, they actually improved a little bit more. I don't get panic attacks anymore. I get a little bit of anxiety coming up, but I don't get panic attacks. You know, I'm getting choked up. The difference was, for me, just remarkable. I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't done EMDR. And so that is my story. I said in my first video, EMDR works for some people, doesn't really work for others. A small group, it for some reason makes them feel worse. But I hope that what I've shared here has been helpful. What I would say is, you know, there is something that is going to work for everybody. You know, you really own your own recovery. You know, work on discovering what works for you. Believe me, you know, I'm 3 years away from when I hit the bottom with my PTSD, and it gets better. So, you know, that's my message today. I hope this was helpful, and I will continue to share about my experiences in living with PTSD. Okay, thanks for today. Bye.